In 1990, a little girl vanished from a rural farmhouse, but no report was ever filed. No investigation, no funeral, just silence. 30 years later, her cousin inherits the house, only to find a journal buried beneath the floorboards, a mirror that doesn't reflect quite right, and a name she was never meant to have. What happened in that house didn't stay buried. Hit subscribe and stay with us, because this is where the story starts to breathe. Cora Ellison arrived at the farmhouse just before dusk, with the last of the sun casting gold across the fields and long shadows through the trees. The house sat crouched at the end of a gravel road, 2 stories of faded white wood and green shutters that hadn't closed properly in decades. The chimney was crumbling. Ivy clung to the porch like it didn't want to let go. She stepped out of her car, the gravel crunching under her boots, and stared at the place her grandmother had called home and had never let anyone visit. The legal paperwork called it a modest rural property. Locals in town called it the haunted place by Ash Creek. Cora just called it hers now. She slung her bag over her shoulder and stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned beneath her, and the front door didn't open easily. She had to shove her shoulder into it. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust, dry wood, and something faintly sweet and rotting, like old apples left too long in a bowl. Everything was still, like time had stopped the moment her grandmother had died and refused to move on. She stood in the silence for a long moment before whispering to no one. Home. The house had been left exactly as it was. A clock on the wall ticked, but the hands didn't move. A quilt was folded neatly over the back of an armchair. Family photos on the mantel, most turned face down. Cora wandered room to room. The floors creaked under every step. The kitchen was clean, but unused. The pantry still had canned goods with labels faded and peeling. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms, one clearly her grandmother's, the other locked. The air was colder there. She paused, trying the doorknob again. Locked tight. In the hallway, a long mirror hung crookedly, covered with a thin layer of grime. She wiped it with her sleeve, and her reflection wavered for a second, just long enough to make her heart hitch. A trick of the light, she told herself. Still, she avoided looking into it again. She slept that first night on the downstairs sofa, wrapped in an old quilt and lulled by the occasional chirp of distant crickets and the creak of cooling wood. But sometime after midnight, she woke up. At first, she didn't know why. Then she heard it again, a slow, dragging sound, like someone, or something, crawling just beneath the floorboards. She sat up, holding her breath. The sound came again, faint, muffled, but real. Then silence. She waited. Nothing. After a while, she lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't return easily. The next morning, Cora walked into town. She needed groceries and maybe a locksmith. The local general store was more curiosity shop than supermarket. It sold everything from canned soup to hand-knitted pot holders. The woman at the counter, early 60s and sharp-eyed, gave her a once-over. "You're the Ellison girl," she said. Cora nodded. "Guilty. Haven't had a soul in that house since your grandma passed. Not that she welcomed anyone before that." "She didn't talk about it much," Cora said carefully. "I didn't even know she still owned it until the lawyer called. She didn't sell, didn't rent, just stayed there, alone." A pause. "Some say she kept it sealed for a reason." Cora raised an eyebrow. "What reason?" The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes walls remember things better than people do." That afternoon, Cora returned with supplies and the name of a local handyman. She unpacked in the kitchen, then explored the back of the house. An old utility room, half collapsed, and a narrow hallway that led to a laundry area. She stepped on a section of floor that sank slightly. Frowning, she knelt down. The floorboards here were different, newer, poorly nailed down. They creaked unnaturally. She pried one loose with a butter knife. Below it, a hollow space, dark and cold. Just big enough for a crawl space, a trap door. And something was down there. Cora fetched a flashlight. The battery flickered, but it worked well enough to reveal the rusted hinges and the makeshift latch. It took effort to get it open. Nails had been driven through the corners, as if someone hadn't just closed it, but tried to seal it shut. When she finally got the hatch up, a gust of cold air rushed out, musty and old, but with something else beneath it. Something sharp. Metal? Mold? She wasn't sure. The space was small, maybe 3 feet high, dirt floor, cobwebs. She shined the light around, and her heart lurched. In the far corner, tucked under a scrap of cloth and an old pillow, a small broken doll, missing one eye, a child's slipper, and a leather-bound journal with yellowed pages and a cracked spine. Cora picked it up carefully. On the front, scrawled in childish handwriting, Lila's book, Don't Read Aloud. That night, Cora didn't sleep. She sat by the fireplace, the journals in her lap. She opened to the first page. They put me down here again because I didn't say sorry. I don't like the dark. It has teeth. I hear breathing sometimes, but it isn't mine. Cora swallowed hard and turned the page. Grandmother says this is punishment, but I didn't do anything wrong. I think she forgets who I am, or maybe she doesn't want to remember. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. A child's. Some of the pages were torn. She turned another page. I think someone else is down here now, but they don't talk. They just whisper and laugh when I sleep. Cora looked up from the page. The house was silent. But from the hallway, deep below the floor, she heard it again. That slow, dragging sound. Cora didn't move at first. She stayed perfectly still on the sofa, the journal resting in her lap, her flashlight flickering slightly in her hand. The sound had come again, soft, scraping, like someone shifting their weight on hands and knees beneath her feet. No animal made a noise like that. No wind could echo that rhythm. It had come from the crawl space. She closed the journal slowly, careful not to let the pages rustle too loud, and stood. Her limbs felt cold, her breath tighter in her chest than it had any right to be. Her phone, as usual, had no signal. The nearest neighbor was a half-mile away, and the only number she had from town was the general store. That woman hadn't exactly seemed eager to help. She grabbed the flashlight and stepped into the back hallway. The trap door waited there, slightly ajar now. She had left it sealed. The flashlight's beam lit up motes of dust floating in the open hatch. The edges of the crawl space were as she'd seen them, dirt, cobwebs, sagging support beams. But now, something was different. Footprints, not hers. Small, bare, pressed into the dust like someone had walked there recently. One set, leading from the far corner toward the edge of the space, and then stopping right beneath where she stood. Her scalp prickled. She pulled the hatch fully open and dropped the beam into the dark. "Hello?" she called, hating how small her voice sounded. No answer. She lowered herself down, boots hitting the dirt floor softly. The air felt heavier here, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades, and maybe hadn't wanted to be. Her flashlight flickered again. She moved slowly to the corner where she'd found the journal. The pillow was still there. So was the doll. But now there was something new. A drawing, sketched in crayon and half crushed under the old bedding. She picked it up. 3 stick figures stood under a jagged sun. One was crossed out with a thick red X. Below it, written in a child's uncertain hand, "Me. Grandmother. The bad one." Back in the kitchen, Cora cleaned the dirt from her hands and sat at the table. She opened the journal again, flipping to the next few pages. "I tried to be good today. I didn't scream when the bugs came out, but Grandmother didn't open the door. She said, "This is where I belong." I dreamed about the girl again. She talks through the walls. I think she used to live here too. I think she never left. If someone finds this book, please remember my name. My name is Lila Annette Grace. I am 9 years old. I am real. Cora stared at the page. That name, Lila Annette Grace. It stirred something. She'd never heard it before, but it felt familiar. She stood, grabbed her laptop from her bag, and tried to search it. But there was no Wi-Fi, and the cell signal was still dead. Frustrated, she wrote the name down and circled it. That evening, she drove into town to the public library. The building was small and lined with books that hadn't been checked out in years. A single librarian sat behind the counter, sipping tea and reading a battered crime novel. Cora approached with caution. "Hi, I'm trying to find information about a girl. Maybe from the 80s or 90s. Her name was Lila Annette Grace." The woman's brow furrowed. "Doesn't ring a bell. That a local?" "I think so. Maybe connected to the farmhouse on Ash Creek." The woman stiffened slightly. "Oh, that house Cora waited. There was a missing child case a long time ago," the librarian said slowly, "but it was never filed officially. No police records, just rumors. Some folks said a child lived there once, a granddaughter. But your grandmother always said she never had kids, far less grandkids." Cora frowned. "Is there anything in the newspaper archives?" The woman hesitated. "You can check the microfilm in the back. Look under obits and missing notices around 1990. Cora spent an hour scanning faded headlines and old police blotters. There was no Lila Grace, no reports of a missing girl. But in the August 1990 issue, she found something else. A small obituary for Caroline Ellison, her grandmother's sister, who passed away peacefully at the family home. That wasn't what surprised Cora. What did was the cause of death. Complications following a nervous breakdown after the loss of her daughter. Caroline had a daughter who was never mentioned. No name, no details, just the loss. Cora stared at the line for a long time, her stomach twisting. If Caroline was her grandmother's sister, and Lila was her daughter, that would make Lila her cousin, or something else. Cora returned home after dark. The wind had picked up, and the house groaned as she unlocked the front door. Inside, everything looked the same, except for one thing. The trapdoor to the crawlspace? Wide open. She stepped closer, heart pounding, and noticed something at the edge of the hole. A single handprint, small and smeared in dirt. Or something darker. On the floorboards beside the hatch, and on the wall near the hallway mirror, freshly written in shaky, childlike scrawl. "You found me. Now find yourself." The writing was still there in the morning. Cora had slept only a few hours, if what she did could be called sleep. Mostly, she lay on the sofa, eyes open, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling. She kept the journal on her chest, as if holding it would keep the house from speaking again. But in the cold light of dawn, nothing had changed. The trap door remained open. The handprint was still smeared near the edge. And on the hallway wall, just beneath the dusty mirror, "You found me. Now find yourself." She touched the letters. The substance felt dry, crumbly. She scraped some onto her fingers. It looked like dirt, but darker, finer, almost as if ash. She didn't let herself finish that thought. Instead, she returned to the kitchen, made herself black coffee, and sat at the table with the journal again. If the house wanted her to read, fine, she would read. The next few pages were stained with smudges, as if Lila had written with trembling fingers. Some of the lines trailed off mid-sentence. Some had entire passages scribbled over in thick black crayon. "It's always cold down here, even in summer. I think it's because the ground is hungry. I don't scream anymore. It doesn't help. I don't cry either. Grandmother says crying is selfish. She said if I behave, I can come back upstairs. But she doesn't look me in the eyes. I think she's afraid of me now. I miss my name. I think I'm forgetting it." Cora paused. Her throat was tight. Lila's voice wasn't just lonely. It was unraveling. Page by page, her sentences became shorter, the handwriting more frantic. Then came a page that was nearly blank, except for a sentence scrawled diagonally across the top. I heard her voice again, the one in the mirror. Cora looked up. Her eyes slowly drifted toward the hallway mirror, still slightly crooked, covered in dust. The one she had wiped the first day, the one where her reflection had flickered. She stood and approached it. The surface was fogged with age and neglect, but she could still make out her outline, and something behind it. She blinked. No, nothing. Just her own form, her own shadow, but something inside her chest tugged. She looked again, and this time, the mirror seemed to ripple. Just for a second, like a puddle reacting to a drop of rain. She stumbled back. Cora returned to the journal and turned the page. A new voice emerged, different handwriting, tighter, older, not Lila's. It was dated 3 years later than the last of Lila's entries. I found the journal buried behind the furnace. I don't know who Lila is, but I think she was real. I've heard the scratching too. The voice in the mirror isn't a voice, it's a memory that forgot how to fade. If anyone reads this, get out of the house. Don't look for her. She doesn't want saving. She wants remembering. No signature, just the date. August 1993. Cora's hands shook slightly. How many children had lived in this house? And why had none of them left a trace? Later that morning, she drove into town again. This time, she stopped at the sheriff's office. A young deputy with sleepy eyes greeted her at the counter. "I'm looking for information about a girl named Lila Annette Grace," she said. "Possibly connected to the old Ellison farmhouse." He frowned. "Not a name I've heard. She would have been 9, around 1990. There may have been other children after, foster kids, or hidden placements, something off the books." He leaned back. "We don't keep unofficial records." "Can I speak with the sheriff?" "He's out at a livestock call. Maybe come back tomorrow." Frustrated, she left her number and stepped back into the warm afternoon. As she walked back to her car, she passed a bench outside the diner, where an older man in a worn denim jacket sat smoking. "You're staying out at the Ellison place, ain't you?" he called out. Cora froze. "Yeah. Figures. Place wakes up when people come back." She approached him. "Did you know Lila Grace?" He exhaled slowly. "Not by name, but I remember a scream. One night, long time ago." A scream. He nodded, high and sharp, like a rabbit when the hawk gets it. "Heard it from my porch. Then the lights in the house went out, and they didn't come back on for a week." He met her eyes. No one talked about it. And after a while, folks stopped asking. That night, Cora sat in the hallway with the journal open in her lap. She hadn't dared go into the upstairs locked room yet. Something told her that was where the final answer lay, but the house wasn't ready to give it. Or maybe she wasn't ready to take it. She placed her palm on the floor, cold, steady. She closed her eyes, and then she heard it again. A whisper, faint, right beneath her. She pressed her ear to the floor. This time, she could make out words. Under the wall." She scrambled up, grabbed the flashlight, and opened the trap door once again. Inside the crawl space, her beam fell on something she hadn't noticed before, a loose plank in the back wall. Someone had pried it open and patched it sloppily with cloth and twine. She moved closer. The air was colder here. She reached forward and peeled the fabric away. Behind it was a hollow cavity. Inside, a tin box. She opened it with shaking fingers. Photos. 3 of them, black and white, faded. The first, a girl with dark braids sitting on the porch steps, hugging a doll. The second, the same girl standing in front of the mirror. The third, a young woman holding a newborn, her face partly hidden, but unmistakably Cora's grandmother. And scrawled on the back of that photo, she named her Lila. But she took my name too. That night the wind changed. It howled through the eaves like a warning, rattling the shutters and hissing beneath the old floorboards. Cora lay on the sofa, wrapped in blankets she no longer trusted. The journal sat on the coffee table, closed but pulsing in her thoughts like a heartbeat. She couldn't stop hearing that voice beneath the floor. Under the wall. And the photos, especially the last one. Her grandmother holding a baby with a name that didn't match any family tree. She named her Lila, but she took my name too. What did that mean? That Lila had been someone else first? That her grandmother had replaced someone? The questions came faster than answers. But one thing was clear now. Her family had buried more than secrets. She returned to the crawl space at midnight. The tin box still sat where she'd left it, but the plank behind it had shifted. As she pulled it back further, more space opened behind it. A narrow tunnel carved crudely through the earth. Shallow, no more than 3 feet deep, but clearly dug by hand. A child's hand. Cora lay flat and shined her light into it. In the center was a bundle wrapped in cloth. She reached inside and pulled it out. The fabric was stiff with time and dirt. Inside, she found a book, not the journal, but a Bible. The nameplate read, "Property of Annette Grace." A different handwriting filled the margins, verses crossed out, angry scrawls in the corners. And near the back, one phrase circled over and over, "Don't read aloud." Cora felt the weight of that warning. She closed the Bible and backed out of the crawl space, heart hammering. She didn't need more whispers. But they came anyway. That night, the mirror changed. Cora had avoided it since the flicker. But as she walked past the hallway on her way to bed, something in her peripheral vision stopped her cold. The mirror was fogged over, not with dust, but moisture, like someone had breathed on it. She stepped closer. Wrote a single letter in the condensation. C. Instantly, a second letter appeared beside it. Oh, she backed away. The next letters appeared slowly, one by one, until the name was complete. Cora. And beneath it, in a smaller, messier script, you were me. I was her. Cora didn't sleep. She turned on every light in the house, even dragged a lamp into the hallway to face the mirror, head on. She sat there for hours, the Bible clutched in her hands, journal beside her. Around 3 a.m., the lamp flickered. And then, she heard it. A voice, not a whisper this time, but a clear, trembling child's voice. "Please don't read it out loud." Cora stood up, heart pounding. "Who are you?" she asked. Silence. "Lila?" The mirror darkened, went from reflection to shadow in seconds, and then she saw it. A child's hand, pressing against the other side of the glass, small, pale, trembling, and behind it, a face, just barely visible, eyes wide, mouth open, silently screaming. Cora stumbled back, the lamp crashed to the ground and burst. The hallway plunged into darkness. The next morning, she didn't leave the house. She sat at the table again, the Bible and journal open in front of her, the photos nearby. She was surrounded by ghosts, none of whom seemed interested in staying quiet anymore. She picked up the journal, found the page where Lila had written, "I think she took me out of the mirror, or maybe she put me in it. I forget." She whispered it aloud. A floorboard groaned in the hallway. She froze. Then, another line, written beneath the first in different handwriting. She wants her name back. Later that day, Cora found the key. It was taped to the underside of the bookshelf in her grandmother's room, wrapped in cloth and sealed with wax. A small iron skeleton key, cold to the touch. She knew what it opened. The locked upstairs room. Her hands trembled as she slid the key into the door and turned. It clicked. The door opened an inch on its own. The air was still, heavy. Dust floated like mist. The curtains were drawn, but thin daylight crept through holes in the fabric. The room was a child's, or had been. A small bed sat against the wall, a toy chest, a rocking horse, dolls, crayons, everything untouched, preserved. The walls were covered in drawings, faces without eyes, trees without leaves, a girl with her back turned. On the far wall, etched into the wood in sharp, deep scratches, Cora's knees buckled. That was her full name. No one had called her that since she was a child. Her grandmother always insisted she go by Cora, said Coraline was cursed. A mistake. Etched below it, a final sentence. She gave me your name so I wouldn't remember mine. Cora ran from the room, down the stairs, into the kitchen. She turned on the faucet and splashed water on her face, shaking. She grabbed her birth certificate from her bag and stared at it. Coraline Ellison born, 1993. But the photo of her grandmother holding a newborn. It was dated 1990. 3 years too early. 3 years before she was born. Unless. She opened the Bible again. Inside the back cover was a torn page from another journal. The writing was shaky. I keep dreaming of the same little girl. She looks like me, but she isn't. She cries when I cry, screams when I scream. Grandmother says we are the same now, that she gave me a name because mine didn't matter anymore. She says if I forget enough, I'll stop hurting. But I still remember. My name is Coraline. Cora didn't remember coming back upstairs. She didn't remember walking through the hallway or stepping into the locked room again. But somehow, she found herself standing in the middle of it. Still, quiet. The air so thick she could almost chew it. The name on the wall hadn't changed. Coraline, scratched deep into the wood like someone had been desperate to remember it, or maybe to make it real. But now, something else had appeared just below it. A second line, carved in the same hand. She took my name so I couldn't scream. Cora stepped closer. Her fingers brushed the wood. The scratches were fresh, clean and deep, like they hadn't aged at all. Behind her, the door creaked slightly. She turned fast. No one. Just the wind pressing faintly against the old glass windows. Or so she told herself. But the truth hung heavy in the air. Someone had remembered something. And it wasn't just her. The child's bedroom was more intact than any room in the house. There was no dust on the dresser. The bed sheets, though faded, smelled faintly of lavender soap. A single braid of hair, tied with red ribbon, lay neatly beside a stuffed rabbit missing an eye. Cora sat on the edge of the bed and reached for the crayon drawings on the wall. Dozens of them, some curling at the edges, some overlapping. Each one messy, frantic, full of disturbing detail. In one, a little girl stood in front of a mirror. In another, her face was missing entirely. One showed a pair of hands reaching through floorboards. Then Cora found the one that made her hands go cold. It showed two girls standing side by side. One smiled. The other had her mouth sewn shut. Between them was a single word, scrawled in red crayon. Mine. She searched the room thoroughly. Under the bed, in the drawers, behind the closet. Nothing. But when she opened the toy chest at the foot of the bed, she found something unexpected. A cassette tape player, old and dust-covered, tucked between blankets and plastic doll limbs. Inside it, a single tape, labeled C-1. Cora stared at it. C for Coraline or for copy? She pressed play. The tape hissed. Then, a child's voice, shaky, small. My name is Coraline. I live in the upstairs room now. Grandmother says I should be grateful, that I was chosen, but I miss being me. Sometimes I look in the mirror and it looks back like it knows I'm lying. I try to remember my old name, but it won't come, not even in dreams. If you find this, please help me remember. I think if I can remember, she can't hold me anymore. I think I wasn't supposed to live. The tape clicked and stopped. Cora rewound it, played it again. The voice was her voice, but younger, much younger. That night she dreamed in fragments. A little girl with her face, a mirror with no reflection. A woman, her grandmother, holding two hands, telling them they were one person now. That the past could be swallowed whole if no one spoke its name. Cora woke gasping, sweating. But instead of fear, she felt a rush of clarity, like something had finally broken open inside her. This wasn't just about Lila, or Annette, or whatever name her grandmother had buried. This was about her, about who she had been before she was Coraline, before she was rescued, before she was renamed. The next morning she found an envelope taped to the back of the mirror. She hadn't noticed it before. Maybe it hadn't been there before. Inside, a single photo, 2 children, both girls, identical. Standing hand in hand in the very hallway she now lived in. One smiled wide, missing a front tooth. The other stared at the camera blankly, her face shadowed. On the back, in familiar curling script, only one could stay. So I chose the quiet one. Cora dropped the photo. Her breath came fast now. What if she wasn't the girl who was saved? What if she was the girl who was left behind, trapped in someone else's name, someone else's life? Downstairs, the mirror was fogged again, her name written across it. But now it had changed. Not Cora, not Coraline, just L-E-O. The rest hadn't formed yet. She stood there staring at it until the condensation faded, like a message pulled back into breath. Behind her, something creaked beneath the floor, and in the mirror, for the first time, the little girl moved. She looked up and smiled. The air in the house had changed. It wasn't just the cold anymore. It was something deeper, thicker, as if the walls had begun to breathe in rhythm with her, like the house was waiting, watching. Cora felt it every time she moved. The boards groaned beneath her steps, even when she stood still. The mirror fogged without warning. And every night now, just after midnight, the sound returned. Breathing. Not hers. Slow, hollow, close. Sometimes it came from under the floor, sometimes from behind the door, and once, just once, it came from right behind her. She kept the journal with her everywhere now. It had become less of a relic and more of a guide. The entries had changed after the halfway point. Lila's voice turning uncertain, panicked, disoriented. I think she traded us. I try to scream, but the air down here swallows the noise. Some nights I hear her upstairs, laughing. Sometimes I think it's me laughing, but I don't feel happy. I remember a different name, but when I say it out loud, the mirror cracks. The page after that was torn. Cora looked into the mirror in the hallway again. It hadn't cracked. Not yet. But she hadn't tried saying the name. Not the one she found in the tape. Not the one scratched into the upstairs wall. She needed answers. That afternoon she returned to the sheriff's office. The older deputy was there this time. Gray hair, deep frown lines. She gave him the name, Lila Annette Grace. Ellison House? He asked quietly. Cora nodded. He rubbed the back of his neck. No record in our files. That house has always been a rumor factory. Supposedly your grandmother had a niece, maybe even a foster child, but nothing official. No school files, no birth certificate. No missing persons reports? He looked at her evenly. Sometimes people disappear before they're ever counted. She leaned forward. And what about me? He blinked. My name is Coraline Ellison, but what if it wasn't always? What if I'm someone else? The deputy hesitated. Then, almost too softly, he said, That house takes things. Names, mostly. Sometimes more. That night, the house didn't whisper. It spoke. Cora was brushing her teeth when the bathroom light flickered and went out. She paused, waiting for it to come back on. Instead, she heard it again, breathing. Heavy, labored, but this time, it was right next to her ear. She spun. Nothing. Then the mirror in the hallway began to fog. She stepped out slowly, barefoot on the cool floor. This time, the name finished itself. Lila beneath it. "Give it back!" Cora backed away, heart racing. "I didn't take it," she whispered. "I didn't know." But the mirror darkened, swallowed her reflection. And then, a sound she hadn't heard since she was a child. A lullaby. Soft, off-key, and wrong. The one her grandmother used to hum when she couldn't sleep. Only now, it wasn't soothing. It felt like a trap being baited. The next morning, she returned to the attic. She hadn't explored it yet. Not truly. The stairs were narrow, the door half-rotted. She pushed it open and climbed up into the dust. Inside, a single trunk sat beneath the window. It opened with a groan. Inside, a burned doll, a child's dress singed at the edges, and a photo album. She flipped through it. The first page, a baby labeled Annette. The second, the same baby, but now written as Lila. Later pages, Cora's own baby photos, or so she thought. But the dates were wrong. The handwriting conflicted. 2 names, 1 child, 1 face, 2 lives. Then the last page. It showed the mirror, cracked, just barely. A caption written beneath it. She came through. That night, Cora set up a voice recorder in the crawl space. She placed it beside the journal, pressed record, and backed out. She slept with the light on and a knife under her pillow. Not because she believed it would help, but because it felt like something real in a house that had stopped obeying reality. In the morning, she retrieved the tape. She played it. At first, silence. Then, at the 2-minute mark, breathing. Heavy, close. And then, a girl's voice. Clear, measured, calm. "You took my name. You took my face. You lived in my place. But I'm still here." Then something else, her own voice. On the recording. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to." The tape cut off, but she hadn't said those words aloud. Not last night, not ever. Cora didn't play the tape again. Once was enough. Hearing her own voice speak words she had never said, calm, pleading, answering something unseen, had shaken her more than any ghost or whisper. Something had changed. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt inhabited. Whatever had stirred beneath the floorboards, inside the mirror, behind the attic walls, it had a voice now. A will. And it wanted to be heard. More than that, it wanted to be remembered. And remembering had a cost. She returned to the locked upstairs room, this time with purpose. The drawings on the wall looked different in the morning light. Less like a child's sketches and more like warnings. Faces half-finished, girls with blank eyes, and always that figure in the mirror. The reflection that stared back when it shouldn't. She opened the toy chest again, hoping to find more tapes. She did. 3 more, tucked beneath the lining like secrets stitched into fabric. They were labeled simply C2L1L2. Her hands trembled. She took them downstairs to the kitchen and set up the recorder again. C2 crackled to life. It was her voice, younger again, more frightened. "Grandmother says I'm lucky. She says I'm the quiet one, the good one. I try to be those things. I try not to remember the girl in the mirror. But she remembers me. She looks like me. But her eyes are darker. She watches me while I sleep." The tape ended abruptly. Cora took a breath, then inserted L-1. The voice was different. Not younger, older, not hers, not frightened, just still. "I remember the dirt first. the way it filled my nose, how the dark tasted like metal. She told me I had to forget, that forgetting would make me free. But I never forgot, not really. She gave my name to someone else. She said I didn't deserve it anymore. But I do. I'm still here. L2 was worse. It began with humming, that same lullaby from before. Then, sometimes I forget whose body I'm in. Sometimes I remember things I never lived. Is that what you feel, Coraline? Cora jolted upright. It was her name, spoken aloud, director, personal. You dream in pieces, I live in corners, but we were always the same. The mirror showed me. It showed me how you walked through while I stayed behind. Now it's your turn. Give me back what's mine. The tape ended in a sharp click. Silence returned, but now it felt expectant, as if something in the house had stepped closer. Cora sat frozen in her chair for a long time. Then she moved, slow and mechanical, until she stood before the hallway mirror again. Fog had already begun to form on the glass. No name appeared this time, only a handprint. Small, familiar, pressed from the inside. Cora reached out and touched the glass. It was warm, the warmth of skin. Then, behind her, a voice, not a whisper but right at her ear. Don't look away. She obeyed, and the mirror blinked. Once, twice, and then it showed her not her reflection, but a different version of herself. A girl in the same clothes, the same face, but her eyes were hollow, black around the edges. Her mouth bent into a smile that didn't belong. She mouthed a word. Cora couldn't hear it, but she knew. Lila. Later that day, she drove into town again. She had one last place to check, the county hospital. Old birth records were public if you knew what to ask for. She gave them both names, Coraline Ellison, Lila Annette Grace. The clerk, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, took his time. He came back 10 minutes later with 2 slim files. Both had birth certificates. Both had matching dates, July 12th, 1990. Same hospital, different mothers listed, but only one child's footprint had been stamped. Both names were attached to the same set of prints. That's not supposed to happen, the clerk said, frowning. Cora nodded slowly. I know. She returned to the house that evening, dragging a shovel from the shed behind her. She didn't know why, exactly, only that her hands moved with certainty. She walked past the garden, past the barn, until she reached the edge of the trees. There, the ground dipped slightly, as if it had been disturbed long ago. She began to dig. It didn't take long. A few feet down, the shovel hit wood. A small box, not a coffin. Too crude. Just something to hide something in. She opened it. Inside, bones, tiny, brittle. And a mirror. Cracked. With something carved into the glass. Coraline equals Lila. She staggered back, fell to her knees. And from the trees came a whisper. Now do you see? The bones in the box were real. Cora sat on the cold ground, the shovel leaning beside her like an exhausted witness. The small wooden box lay open between her knees, filled with what remained of a child who had been erased. There was no coffin, no marker, no name, just a cracked mirror, and the truth carved into it. Coraline equals Lila. Or was it? The line between them had blurred so deeply, so cruelly, that Cora no longer knew if she had stolen Lila's name, or if Lila had stolen hers. And maybe that was the point. Maybe her grandmother had never chosen between them. Maybe she had merged them. Back inside the house, the mirror no longer fogged. It reflected clearly now, but what it showed wasn't quite right. When Cora passed it, the girl inside moved just a second behind, like a memory lagging behind the body. Cora approached it and stared herself down. "Who am I?" she asked. The reflection smiled, but said nothing. On instinct, Cora opened the journal again. She flipped toward the back, past the torn pages and the rants scrawled in crayon. She found one final entry, tucked into a folded sheet hidden in the spine. They say when a child is buried without a name, her spirit clings to what it finds. I clung to my name, but grandmother gave it to someone else, and she gave me silence. I learned to scream without sound. Now I want it back. Beneath it, drawn faintly in pencil, a mirror with two girls inside. One was crying, the other was knocking on the glass. That night, the house pressed in around her like lungs exhaling slowly. The walls groaned, the windows trembled. The electricity dimmed with every passing hour. She sat on the floor of the upstairs bedroom, the one with the name carved into the wall, and laid the mirror from the grave beside her. It was small, handheld, spiderwebbed with cracks. She stared into it. The air grew still, and then, from behind her, the voice returned. Clear, younger, her own and not her own. "I was born in this house. You were made in it." Cora turned. No one there. "I was punished. You were protected." A chill swept across her skin. "I am the memory that wouldn't die. You are the name that lived. But neither of us are whole." The walls of the room began to whisper, not in words, but in memory. She felt the sharp burn of punishment, the endless dark beneath the floor, the silence that drowned out crying. She remembered being told she was bad, but never why. Then she remembered warmth, soft sheets, a name whispered kindly. Coraline. 2 sets of memories, 1 fractured life. She grabbed the cracked mirror and held it to her face. "I want the truth," she said, "even if it's broken." The glass in her hand shimmered, and for the first time, it answered back. A voice, not hers, not Lila's, but something in between. Then break what's left. Cora returned to the crawl space with a hammer. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, only that something was still hidden beneath the boards. Something neither journal nor tape had shown her. She pried open more of the space behind the false wall. More dirt, more bones. But this time, she found something else. A birth certificate. Water damaged, torn, but legible. Name, Annette Grace Ellison. Date of birth, July 12, 1990. Mother, Caroline Ellison. Status, stillborn. Her blood turned to ice. She flipped the paper over, a handwritten note scribbled in red ink. She wasn't still. She was taken. And at the bottom, a fingerprint, tiny, pressed in ink. Below it, 1 word, Lila. The house went silent. So did Cora, because it was all beginning to make sense now. There had never been 2 girls, just one, born wrong, named wrong, labeled dead, but she had lived and been split by grief, by secrecy, by a grandmother who couldn't reconcile a child who shouldn't have survived. So she buried the truth, gave the child a new name, a new life. But the old name had stayed behind, stuck in the mirror, in the dirt, in the bones. That night she sat again before the mirror. Not the one in the hallway. The grave mirror, the one with her name carved into its back. She placed it in her lap, took the cracked Bible, the journal, the birth certificate, the photo, all of it, a life torn in half. "I am Lila Annette Grace," she said softly. "I am Coraline Ellison." The reflection in the mirror smiled. A tear slid down its cheek, and then the mirror shattered in her hands, not violently, not with pain, but gently, like a chain slipping loose. The house exhaled. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, she heard a child laughing for the first time. The next morning, the house was quiet. Not the thick, stifling silence that smothered breath and thought. This was different. Lighter, still haunted, but not angry. The shattered mirror lay in pieces on the floor beside Cora, each fragment catching sunlight like tiny stars. She hadn't moved since it broke. She hadn't needed to. Somewhere in the night, something had let go. But not everything. Because as she rose and gathered the fragments, she noticed something strange. One shard, larger than the rest, still reflected the old hallway, the peeling wallpaper, the fogged mirror. A mirror that no longer existed. It flickered once, then went dark. And just before the image vanished, she saw something behind her. A small figure, standing at the edge of the trees, waiting. Cora returned to the back of the property. The wind had shifted again, coming now from the east, where the trees bent low and the grass grew in uneven patches. She moved past the barn, past the crumbled fence, and toward the hollow where she had first found the box of bones. But something pulled her further. A trail. Narrow, worn, covered by decades of growth, but still there if you looked hard enough. She followed it. It led her to a second clearing, smaller, almost hidden, and in its center, a shallow mound, fresh, not decades old. She dropped to her knees and began to dig. The soil was loose, as if someone had turned it recently. After only a few minutes, her fingers scraped wood. The box here wasn't handmade like the first. It was modern, sealed, clean. Inside, another journal. New. She opened it. The first page read, Coraline Ellison, found 2024, vitals normal. Subject shows mild memory confusion, no physical injuries. Reintegration ongoing. Cora stared. The second page. Subject was discovered in crawlspace. No matching records found. Estimated age, 8 to 10 years old. Caretaker reports child claimed to be Lila. Caseworker dismissed as trauma-induced identity fragmentation. Child renamed Coraline to reduce confusion. At the bottom, a stamp. Case closed. She turned the last page. A photo was taped there, her, at 9 years old, standing outside the farmhouse, alone. Cora sat back, breath caught somewhere between fury and heartbreak. They hadn't just taken her name. They'd taken her entire past. Her truth, hidden it away, buried it, not in 1990, not 30 years ago, but last week. Who had left this box here? Who had written the journal? She turned the photo over. A single line was written on the back in blocky handwriting. I remember now. Do you? She looked up, and for a brief second, she wasn't alone. A little girl stood at the edge of the clearing, dark hair, bare feet. She didn't speak, just smiled, and vanished into the trees. Back in the house, Cora set the journals side by side. The old one, Lila's. The new one, hers. Same entries, different hands. Like two halves of a conversation written years apart, somehow destined to meet. The final page of the new journal had one last sentence. Now that you remember, I can rest. She closed the book. The mirror in the hallway, the one that had always fogged, was now clear. Clean. She stood before it. For the first time, her reflection smiled at the same time she did. No lag, no delay. No other girl waiting behind the glass. That night, the house exhaled again. A soft wind moved through the walls. The hallway light stopped flickering. The breathing ceased. The tapping beneath the floor went still. And when Cora passed the mirror before bed, something had been written there, traced in dust with the smallest of fingers. Thank you. She didn't wipe it away. Cora didn't sleep much that night, but not because of fear. For the first time since she arrived, the silence in the house wasn't oppressive. It was thoughtful, settled. The tension in the walls had ebbed. The floorboards no longer groaned with every step, and the mirror, the one that had haunted her since the beginning, reflected her plainly. No flicker, no delay, no child hiding in the glass. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was waiting. Not out of vengeance, but for a choice. She walked the house in the early morning, room by room, touching the walls, the windows, the scars in the floor where the furniture had been dragged for generations. The names carved into door frames, the toy rabbit with the missing eye, the cracked Bible, all of it. Fragments of a life that wasn't quite hers, but wasn't not hers either. She had been Lila once, and Coraline too. She had lived as both, remembered pieces of both, and that meant she could decide what came next. But first, there was one last place to visit. She opened the trap door to the crawl space for the final time. This time, the air didn't feel hostile. It felt expectant. Cora climbed down, flashlight in hand, though she barely needed it now. The darkness no longer seemed absolute. Shadows receded from her steps. In the far wall, the same gap where she'd found the first journal gaped slightly wider now. Something glinted inside. She reached in and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth, unfolded it. A locket. Inside, 2 tiny photos. One of her, Coraline, no more than 9, and another, grainy, older, a little girl with braids and wide eyes. Lila, 2 sides, 1 chain, and beneath the hinge, etched in small lettering, "Let her be whole." Back upstairs, the mirror fogged once more. Not fully, not like before, just a trace, the faint breath of a child on glass. A message appeared, "You can go." Then a pause, and beneath it, "Or I can." The mirror stilled. Cora touched the glass, warm, like skin again. She closed her eyes, spoke, barely above a whisper. "I'll stay." The mirror flickered, once, then cleared. Her reflection smiled, but not hers anymore. Lila's, and for the first time, that girl stepped backward in the glass, turned, and walked away. Not into shadow, not into the house, but into light. That evening, Cora packed her things, not in a rush, not to escape. She wasn't running, she was ready. The journals stayed behind. So did the mirror, the locket, the house itself. But the memory that she carried with her, not as a curse, but as a story. A life not forgotten, a truth no longer buried. She locked the front door behind her and turned toward the road. The wind blew gently through the branches overhead, and from deep within the trees, she heard a child's voice, clear and bright and free. "Thank you." Cora smiled, then walked away into the fading sunlight, leaving the house on Broken Elm Street finally silent.